They said she drank too much and fell. Case closed. But what if the truth was buried deeper than the body? No security footage. Conflicting stories. A second autopsy that revealed something the first one didn't. Injuries no one could explain. Why did some guests delete their messages? Why did the 911 call come hours too late? This isn't just a story about a woman who died. It's about the silence that followed her death and the storm her family unleashed in pursuit of the truth. Studio microphone ***, pause, sound of wind, faint 911 call, ***. The sun rose slowly over Bellwood, a picturesque town nestled in the mountains of North Carolina. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. But on November 4, 2018, Bellwood would wake up to a tragedy that would shake the foundations of its quiet charm. Brianna Dorsey, a 40-year-old mother of 5, was found lifeless in the backyard of a large, 2-story home where she had attended an overnight birthday celebration. The women who had hosted the party, most of them local school parents and PTA regulars, claimed Brianna had fallen off the balcony during the night after drinking too much. An accident, they said. Just a tragic accident. But Brianna's family never bought that story. And as it turned out, neither did a growing number of people across the country. Let's go back. The night before, the house on Willow Hollow Lane was filled with laughter, music, and the buzz of birthday energy. Janelle Ray, the hostess, had planned the evening for weeks. Brianna was the only black woman invited to the gathering of 11 women and one man, Janelle's husband, who stayed upstairs during most of the party. Brianna, energetic and kind-hearted, had brought her signature dessert, worn her favorite gray hoodie, and poured shots for the group with her usual cheer. She lit up every room, her sister once said. You didn't forget her once you met her. Around midnight, things started winding down. Some women left, others stayed the night. Brianna was among those who decided to sleep over. She didn't want to drive after drinking. A guest later recalled that Brianna had gone upstairs to rest, saying goodnight to everyone. By 7:30 a.m., she was dead. The 911 call came in at 8:46 a.m. Janelle's husband, who had reportedly found the body while preparing to leave for a business trip, spoke calmly on the call. She must have fallen from the balcony, he said. She's not breathing. The dispatcher asked if she was alive. No, he said flatly. She's face down. Police arrived shortly after. The backyard was eerily quiet, except for the faint hum of wind rustling the tall pine trees. Brianna's body lay face down, motionless. She was dressed in the same pajamas she'd worn to bed, gray lounge pants and a white shirt, but something about the position of her limbs struck one officer as odd. Her right wrist was twisted unnaturally. There were deep cuts on her face, and her neck seemed bruised. Still, the initial ruling? Accident. Drunk fall. But Brianna's family wasn't convinced. By Monday morning, her sister, Nyla Dorsey, stood in front of the local sheriff's office demanding answers. My sister had 5 children, she told reporters. She was smart, joyful, and cautious. You're telling me she just fell? And everyone inside just slept through it. The questions were piling up. Why were there conflicting witness statements? Why did no one call 911 until nearly 2 hours after some guests claimed they discovered her? Why did the autopsy list multiple injuries inconsistent with a simple fall? The Dorsey family pushed for a second autopsy. When it came back, it listed injuries to the neck and torso that may be indicative of foul play. It also revealed a laceration to her heart. Her heart. The case took on national attention. Social media lit up with the hashtag #JusticeForBrianna as many began to see echoes of deeper systemic failures. The story was no longer just about a woman who died at a party. It was about race, power, and the quiet silence of a town unwilling to ask hard questions. But still, the official line held firm: accident. Even as the sheriff's office released heavily redacted incident reports. Even as friends of the Dorsey family claimed they were being intimidated into silence. Behind closed doors, something was happening. Someone was whispering. A source from inside the investigation, who asked not to be named, told a local journalist, "There's more here than we're allowed to say." That journalist, Carla Jameson, dug deeper. "I went to that house," she said later. I saw the balcony. It's high, yes, but to fall off and end up like that? Face down in the grass with injuries to your chest and head? It didn't add up. Neither did the timeline. One of the women at the party had deleted her texts. Another had lost her phone. Surveillance footage from a nearby neighbor's security camera showed shadows moving around 4 a.m., but the backyard lights were off. But as Carla's investigation grew legs, the town began to split. Some locals supported the Dorsey family, holding candlelight vigils and protesting outside the courthouse. Others defended the party guests, insisting it was all a tragic misunderstanding. Whispers of outsiders trying to stir up trouble echoed through churches and barbershops. But the truth doesn't go away. It only waits. 1 year after Brianna Dorsey's death, new evidence would surface. And with it, a long-held secret would threaten to unravel everything Bellwood thought it knew. Justice, no matter how long it takes, isn't always silent. Please, before we continue, like, comment, subscribe and share with your loved ones, and also turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. The morning of October 29, 2021, started with a thin veil of fog drifting lazily over the quiet suburban town of Eldridge, Georgia. It was the kind of morning where the world feels paused, hushed, as though something terrible is about to unfold. In the Dorsey household, the day began like any other. Brianna's husband, Jerome Dorsey, was in the kitchen pouring cereal for their youngest, while the older kids got ready for school upstairs. At 7:28 a.m., the phone rang. Hello. This is Deputy Allen from Eldridge County Sheriff's Department. Is this Jerome Dorsey? Yes. Is everything okay? Sir, we need you to come down to 452 Moonlight Lane immediately. It's about your wife, Brianna. Jerome felt the bowl slip from his hands and crash onto the floor. The cereal scattered like confetti, but all he could hear was the sudden roaring silence in his ears. That address, Moonlight Lane, was the home where Brianna had gone the night before for what was supposed to be a harmless ladies' sip and slumber gathering. A mom's night out. A safe space. She had kissed him goodnight around 10 p.m., promising to be back in the morning. Now, he was being summoned to the scene by police. Jerome drove with trembling hands. When he arrived, the street was already blocked off with flashing lights and yellow police tape. A group of women stood outside in blankets and oversized t-shirts. Some hugged themselves, others whispered behind cupped hands. One woman sat on the porch steps, crying, but no one moved to comfort her. A sheriff's deputy pulled Jerome aside gently. Sir, I'm afraid your wife was found in the backyard this morning. She was unresponsive when paramedics arrived. We did everything we could. He didn't hear the rest. His knees buckled, and he collapsed against the officer's shoulder. Brianna, his wife, anchor, was gone. Wife's anchor was gone. According to the women inside, Brianna had gone out to the back porch around midnight. She never came back in. They assumed she had fallen asleep somewhere in the house or left early. It wasn't until 7 a.m. that someone thought to check outside. She was found face down in the grass, motionless, her body cold to the touch. The initial police report stated that Brianna had likely fallen from the second-story deck and died due to accidental injuries consistent with a fall. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma. The authorities said there were no signs of foul play and the toxicology report was pending. But Jerome knew something was wrong. According to the women inside, Brianna had gone out to the back porch around midnight. She never came back in. They assumed she had fallen asleep somewhere in the house or left early. It wasn't until 7 a.m. that someone thought to check outside. She was found face down in the grass, motionless, her body cold to the touch. The initial police report stated that Brianna had likely fallen from the second-story deck and died due to accidental injuries consistent with a fall. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma. The authorities said there were no signs of foul play and the toxicology report was pending. But Jerome knew something was wrong. His wife wasn't clumsy. She wasn't reckless. And she absolutely did not drink heavily, something the women had insisted was part of the night. One woman claimed Brianna had been stumbling and tipsy. Another said she seemed out of it. Yet Jerome had driven her there, and she was perfectly coherent, even playful. Their last conversation echoed in his mind. "Do you trust these women?" "I barely know half of them," Brianna had joked. "But it's a mom thing, you know. I figured I'd try." She hadn't even brought a change of clothes. It was never meant to be a full sleepover for her. As detectives interviewed the women one by one, something became clear. The stories didn't match. One woman said they were all asleep by midnight. Another said some stayed up until 2 a.m. watching Netflix. A third claimed Brianna had wandered into the backyard alone to cool off. No one explained why it took them 7 hours to look for her. No one could answer why she was outside. No one explained why it took them 7 hours to look for her. No one could answer why she was outside without shoes. No one knew how she had injuries inconsistent with a simple fall, including bruising on her arms and a deep cut behind her ear. Jerome wasn't alone in his suspicions. Brianna's sister, Kimberly, a nurse in Atlanta, reviewed the autopsy photos and grew alarmed. "That's not from a fall," she whispered. "Look at her hands. Defensive wounds." Still, the sheriff's office insisted the case was closed. That night, Jerome sat in the living room, his children finally asleep upstairs, staring at the flickering television. The news didn't cover Brianna's death. No headlines. No justice. That he pulled out his laptop and clicked open the files Brianna had backed up just 2 weeks prior on a USB drive. She had been working on a video project about mental health awareness for mothers and had filmed casual interviews with other women, some of whom were at that slumber party. One clip stood out. In the video, Brianna recorded herself whispering, "Sometimes I feel like I'm surrounded by people wearing masks. It's like you smile, you laugh, but something's off. I know something's off." She looked scared, unnerved. Jerome stared at the screen. What had she sensed? Jerome took the drive to the police station the next morning. He demanded they reopen the case, demanded they watch the footage, demanded answers. He was turned away. "There's no criminal investigation," they said. "But there should be," he replied. "My wife is dead and no one will tell me why." That's when Kimberly reached out to an investigative journalist, Tasha Kane, who ran a regional podcast called Truthcast South. She listened to the story, watched the footage, and asked only one question. "Are you ready to go public?" That day, Jerome Dorsey said yes. Because silence had already buried his wife. And someone out there knew what really happened on Moonlight Lane. The podcast episode dropped on a rainy Tuesday morning. It was titled, Sip, Slumber and Silence, The Death of Brianna Dorsey. Within hours, it had over 30,000 downloads. By the end of the week, it cracked the national charts. Tasha Kane's narration was measured and haunting. She played snippets of Brianna's video diary, layered over with soft piano keys and distant thunder. There was no sensationalism, just facts, questions, inconsistencies, and an invitation. If you were at the house that night and you know something, this is your chance to speak. The response was overwhelming. Anonymous tips flooded in. But one voice stood out. A young woman who went by the pseudonym Grace. Tasha received the email on a Thursday evening. "I was there that night. I wasn't supposed to be, but I ended up staying because I had too much wine and didn't feel safe driving. I saw things I shouldn't have. For more, I don't trust the others. I need to talk, but only in person." The message came with a location and time. Tasha met Grace at a gas station off Highway 118, neutral ground. Grace was 22 years old, soft-spoken, and visibly shaken. "I was the cousin of one of the guests," she said. "Just visiting for the weekend. They didn't want me there. Said it was a mom thing. But I was already inside and it was raining. So they let me stay on the couch." Then she paused, voice trembling. "Around midnight, I went to the kitchen for water. That's when I heard them arguing on the back porch. Brianna and 2 of the women. One of them said, 'You think you're better than us just because people like you?' Then a loud noise and silence. Back in Eldridge, Jerome Dorsey was in his garage, surrounded by his wife's belongings, trying to breathe through the crushing grief. Every corner of the house echoed her absence. The smell of her lavender body butter still clung to their pillow. The baby's jacket still had her hand-sewn initials in the lining. He hadn't touched her tea mug on the counter. Her fingerprints were probably still there. Then the doorbell rang. It was Detective Rachel Weaver, one of the few who hadn't written the case off as an accident. "I can't say this officially," she whispered at his door, "but off the record, don't stop. Whatever you're doing, keep pushing." With Weaver's quiet support, Jerome hired a private forensic investigator, Thomas Reddick, a retired SBI agent with a reputation for exposing corruption. Thomas visited the Moonlight Lane property. He stood on the second-story deck where Brianna was said to have fallen. Then he walked down and examined the patch of grass where her body had been found. "It doesn't add up," he told Jerome. "There's a vertical drop, yes, but not enough to kill, unless she landed headfirst or was already unconscious." He pointed to a bush nearby. "Broken branches. Drag marks. It looks like she was moved." Jerome's breath caught. All this time, they'd been told she fell. But now, it seemed she was placed as pressure mounted from the podcast and community. The original Sip and Slumber attendees began to retreat into silence or flee. One woman, Sandra Wilkes, moved out of state abruptly, deleting all social media. Another, Evelyn Chambers, hired an attorney and refused interviews. Only Carla Jennings, the homeowner, agreed to speak publicly, and even she looked worn. "None of us wanted this," she said in a shaky TV interview. "It was supposed to be a fun night. I don't know what happened outside. I was asleep." But viewers noticed the nervous glance, the way her hands wrung her sleeves. She wasn't telling the full truth. While Thomas continued his fieldwork, Jerome returned to the USB. One file had been overlooked, a locked folder titled Red Room. It required a password. Jerome tried every birthday, anniversary, and pet name he could think of. Nothing worked. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel to enable us to bring more videos like this. Until he typed in, "Truth wins," a phrase Brianna often used in her journal entries. The folder opened. Inside were screenshots of text messages. Long chains. Some benign. Others chilling. "She's always watching. Thinks she's so perfect. Someone needs to knock her down a peg. Don't worry. We'll deal with her." They were from a group chat. One that included several women from the Moonlight Lane gathering. Brianna had saved everything. She had known. Jerome took the folder to the sheriff's office. But this time, he brought Tasha Kane and her recording equipment. They weren't turned away quietly. "This is harassment," said Sheriff Coleman. "The case is closed." "And we're just getting started," Tasha replied, rolling tape. That night, Truthcast South released a second explosive episode. Red Room, the secret chat that preceded Brianna's death. Public outrage exploded. Local news picked up the story. Protesters stood outside the sheriff's department with signs reading, "Justice for Brianna. We see you." She didn't just fall. The silence was finally breaking. And as Eldridge stirred from its hush of comfort and secrecy, it became painfully clear. What happened on Moonlight Lane wasn't an accident. It was a warning. And Brianna had seen it coming. She just didn't survive it. The morning after Truthcast South dropped its Red Room episode, Eldridge was buzzing. The once sleepy southern town had become ground zero in a firestorm of public outcry, speculation, and long overdue reckoning. Posters of Brianna Dorsey's face were plastered on light poles and storefront windows. Students at Brianna's alma mater walked out in protest, and the sheriff's office found itself surrounded by cameras, signs, and voices shouting in unison. No justice, no peace. But behind the chants and headlines, something more powerful was beginning to stir. Someone was ready to talk. Tasha Kane's burner phone rang at 3:12 a.m. A voice whispered through static, "You don't know me, but I know what happened to Brianna. I was there. Not in the house, but close. I saw something." Tasha sat up in bed, heart pounding. "Can we meet?" she asked. "Not yet. I'm scared. But I recorded something. I can send it. If anything happens to me, let people know I tried." 10 minutes later, the file landed in her inbox. It was an audio clip, muffled and shaky, but chilling. "She's out cold. What the hell are we gonna do?" Just say she fell. It's an accident, right? This ain't gonna go away. Then we make sure it does. The voices weren't crystal clear, but the fear was. The janitor's memory. As momentum built, Thomas Reddick, the retired SBI agent, decided to revisit an often overlooked lead. A quiet man named Marlon Hughes, who had worked part-time on the property for years. No one had seriously questioned him. He'd been dismissed as too old, too tired to remember much. But Thomas wasn't convinced. He tracked Marlon down at his trailer on the edge of town. The man looked startled to see him but invited him in. "I remember that night," Marlon said slowly, running a hand over his gray beard. "There was a lot of shouting. Women arguing. One crying. Then it went quiet. Too quiet." He paused. "When I came by the next morning to clean up, I saw Carla Jennings outside. She was scrubbing the porch. Like she was trying to erase something." Thomas leaned in. "Why didn't you come forward?" Marlon stared at his hands. "Because Carla's brother is a deputy. And I've seen what happens to people who talk." The leak of the Red Room messages, paired with the anonymous audio recording, created a tidal wave too large to contain. News Nation, CNN, and even Dateline began circling. The pressure forced Sheriff Coleman to hold a press conference, his first since Brianna's death. He looked haggard, his voice defensive. "We are reviewing new evidence and will act accordingly. At this time, there is no proof of foul play." The words only fueled the fire. That night, a group of local activists camped outside the sheriff's home. They held candles, chanted softly, and sang Brianna's favorite gospel hymn. Inside, Coleman watched from behind the blinds, face pale. He knew it was over. Thomas's investigation bore fruit in the most unexpected place: the grass stains on Brianna's leggings. When cross-referenced with the soil sample from under the deck, the chemical compositions didn't match. "She didn't fall there," he explained to Jerome. "She was placed there, likely after death." He brought this information to Rachel Weaver, the detective who had quietly been working with him. Weaver filed for a warrant to reopen the scene. A judge, pressured by public sentiment, approved it. They uncovered a second patch of soil hidden behind the garage, covered in lye, a corrosive substance used to speed decomposition. And in that soil, a single clump of bloodied hair. DNA tests came back inconclusive, but it was enough. The district attorney had no choice but to convene a grand jury. It was then that Sandra Wilkes, the woman who had fled town, re-emerged. Her attorney brokered a deal, testimony in exchange for immunity. In a closed-door session, she spoke for over 4 hours. And when she emerged, her face was tear-streaked. "I was scared," she whispered to reporters. "But silence is how evil survives. I couldn't stay quiet anymore." According to leaks, Sandra claimed that after a heated argument, Brianna had been pushed, not off a deck, but down a flight of stairs inside the house. The women panicked. Brianna was barely breathing. Instead of calling 911, they moved her, cleaned her, changed her clothes, and dropped her body in the yard, beneath the deck. It was supposed to look like an accident, but it never sat right. She didn't deserve that. The town of Eldridge was no longer a quiet place. It was a battleground of truth versus denial, guilt versus justice, and secrets versus sunlight. And for the first time since Brianna Dorsey's death, the whispers had turned into a roar that could not be silenced. They told Brianna Dorsey's family she had too much to drink, that she tripped, that it was just a tragic accident. But how do you fall backwards, bruised and broken, while others laugh in the next room? What if the real cause of death was carefully swept under the rug by the very people pouring the drinks? For weeks after Brianna's funeral, the Dorsey home was quiet, too quiet. Her children, usually full of life and noise, moved around like shadows. Her husband, Maurice, sat often in the garage, staring at nothing. But the silence in the house mirrored the silence outside it too. The slumber sip, women went back to their lives. Some posted smiling photos. Others sent sympathy cards, but none came to visit. None followed up. And most importantly, none spoke publicly about what really happened that night. Until someone finally did. It started with a knock on Jerome Dorsey's door. He opened it to find a woman, mid-30s, pale, nervous, holding a folded piece of paper. Her name was Kyra Martin. She had been at the Slumber sip too. She hadn't said anything during the police interviews. But the guilt had eaten at her every night since. "I saw more than I told them," she whispered. "I didn't know how to say it. I was scared." Jerome let her in. The kids were at school, the house still heavy with grief. Kyra sat at the kitchen table and unfolded the paper. It was a screenshot of a text conversation, hers and another attendee, Erica Hale. In it, Erica wrote, "We better all stick to the story. No one needs to know what Dana said, or how Brianna got pushed. Let that lie die with the night." Jerome felt the air leave his lungs. Pushed? Kyra's hands trembled. "I didn't push her. I didn't see the whole thing. But there was a fight. Not like fists. Just ugly words. Dana accused Brianna of being stuck up. It turned mean. He recorded everything she said and asked if she would talk to the police. I don't know. I should. But I'm scared. They're all close. Dana's brother is a cop. If I speak, it won't go well for me." Still, something had changed. A crack had formed in the wall of silence. Jerome took the screenshot and the audio recording to his lawyer, then to a local reporter he trusted, Jason Penn from Channel 7. Jason had been following Brianna's story but had kept a respectful distance, until now. Within a week, a new segment aired on TV. New evidence surfaces in Brianna Dorsey case. Witness comes forward. The community lit up. People who had stayed silent began whispering. Online comments turned sharp. Why didn't the cops dig deeper? Where's the autopsy report? Why did those women go home like nothing happened? 2 days later, someone leaked part of the police body cam footage from that night. It showed officers laughing with one of the partygoers, Dana Wilkins. One officer even hugged her. There was no serious questioning, no cordoned-off scene, no urgency. The footage was damning. Jason ran another special. Justice or favors? The handling of Brianna Dorsey's death under scrutiny. By now, the district attorney couldn't ignore the pressure. They announced they would reopen the case. Maurice finally felt like his wife's voice, silenced too soon, was being heard again. But the real turn came when Brianna's oldest child, Tatiana, released a letter to the public. In it, she wrote, "My mother didn't go to that party to fight or die. She went to enjoy herself. Now we live with questions that no one wants to answer. I'm 17, and I have more courage than some grown women. If you saw something, say something. Let my mother rest in truth, not lies." The letter went viral. Local activists organized a candlelight vigil in front of the sheriff's office. Hundreds showed up. Some held signs. Others lit candles. Tatiana spoke through tears, saying she just wanted her mom's name cleared. One woman stepped forward at the vigil. Her name was Jasmine Tate. She hadn't spoken yet either. "I wasn't going to say anything," she said to the crowd. "But seeing Tatiana, I can't keep quiet anymore. I heard Dana threaten her. I saw Brianna fall. And I swear, she didn't trip. She was shoved. That was it." The case burst open. Detectives from the State Bureau of Investigations, SBI, got involved. They began pulling phone records, private messages, and even surveillance footage from a neighbor's doorbell cam across the street from the party house. One clip showed women dragging something heavy out to the back porch around 2 a.m. Then, silence. It wasn't proof of murder. Not yet. But it was enough to paint a picture of a cover-up. The women at the party started lawyering up. Dana Wilkins deactivated her social media. Erica Hale left town. But Jasmine Tate agreed to testify. So did Kyra. And a third witness came forward. A teenage niece who had been upstairs in the house that night and overheard everything. The truth was finally crawling out from beneath the lies. Maurice felt a flicker of peace, just a flicker. Tatiana held her mother's scarf every night. The twins still cried in their sleep. But as they watched the case unfold on the news, they felt something else. Hope. Brianna's family finally gets a breakthrough when 2 women who attended the party come forward to reveal there was a fight and that Brianna may have been pushed. The police are accused of mishandling the case. A reporter spreads the story, and a vigil becomes the turning point where more witnesses step up. The case is reopened by the SBI, and cracks begin to show in the carefully constructed lie. The courtroom was quiet. Not the usual kind of courtroom silence. This one felt different, heavy. Like the air itself was thick with the weight of every unspoken truth. Brianna Dorsey's family sat in the second row. Her sister, Donna, clutched a folded tissue in her hand, creased and worn from the weeks of tears. Her mother sat beside her, hands clasped in her lap, staring straight ahead, lips tight, eyes glassy. Today was the final hearing. Not a trial, exactly, at least not yet, but the day the court would decide whether Brianna's case deserved to move forward. Whether the new evidence brought forth by the independent investigator and the witness who had come forward was enough to pursue criminal charges. It had been 16 months since Brianna was found dead in that backyard. The official report had never sat right. Accidental fall. That was all they wrote. No mention of the bruises on her arms. No note about the cut above her eye or the mud in her mouth. They said she was drunk. They said she slipped. But her family knew Brianna. She never drank like that. She wouldn't have been out on that deck alone. And she definitely wouldn't have just fallen. Now, for the first time, someone was listening. District Attorney Angela Mendez stood before the judge, her voice calm but steady. She reviewed the inconsistencies, the gaps in the timeline, the multiple security cameras that weren't working, the conflicting stories from the women at the Slumber sip, and most importantly, the new statement from Tanya Rhodes, one of the partygoers who had remained silent until now. Tanya had called the tip line anonymously, shaking. She couldn't live with herself anymore. The memory haunted her, Brianna arguing with two women that night. Heated words. Something about jealousy, about boundaries crossed. Tanya had seen Brianna pushed. Not down the balcony, but hard enough for her to stumble. She remembered laughter. Then panic. Then silence. She had been told to shut her mouth. Now, finally, she was speaking. As the prosecutor continued, the defense side sat motionless. The original investigators hadn't even been called to attend. One of the women from the party, Angela Monroe, was present. She sat stiff, her eyes fixed on the judge, lips pressed in a straight line. She didn't look back at Brianna's family. Not once. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Elaine Porter, finally spoke after hearing all arguments. She leaned forward slowly and took off her glasses. "There are gaps in this case," she began, her voice low but deliberate. "There were mistakes made. Evidence was not properly collected. Witnesses were not fully interviewed. The scene was compromised before proper review. That is undeniable." Donna leaned and breath held. "I'm not here to place blame today," Judge Porter continued, her gaze sweeping across the room, "but I am here to ensure that justice is not denied by silence, nor by negligence." A ripple of breath moved through the courtroom. "I find there is sufficient reason to reopen this case under formal criminal investigation. The evidence, including the new witness testimony, merits further examination. This matter will be handed over to the State Bureau of Investigations with full authority to pursue charges, should they be warranted." A deep hush followed her words, then a wave of gasps and murmurs swept the courtroom. On the prosecution bench, Angela Mendez let out a quiet breath. Across the room, Donna Dorsey covered her mouth, tears streaming silently. Her mother reached for her hand. For the first time in over a year, something had shifted. The silence around Brianna's death, the thick, cold silence that had kept the truth buried, was finally beginning to crack. As the session adjourned, reporters outside scrambled to go live. Protesters behind the barricades erupted in cheers, holding up signs that read, "Justice for Brianna Dorsey," and "Say her name." Strangers hugged. Neighbors cried. Black mothers clutched the hands of their daughters a little tighter. Inside the courthouse, Deborah Miles, Brianna's closest friend and the woman who had pushed for the independent review, walked slowly toward Donna. "She didn't deserve what happened," Deborah said, her voice shaky. "And now, maybe someone will finally say it out loud." Donna nodded, gripping her friend's hand. "They're going to hear her name. They're going to remember who she was." Outside, the world seemed different. Still broken, still aching, but no longer deaf to Brianna's voice. Later that night, news outlets across the country replayed the footage. The judge's ruling, the chants outside, the candlelight vigil that formed quietly near the school where Brianna's children had once been dropped off every morning. And in one quiet living room, a framed photo of Brianna sat by the window. She was smiling in it, bright, alive, strong. Her favorite earrings on. Her head tilted slightly like she was caught mid-laugh. A candle burned beside the photo. Its flame flickered, dancing gently in the darkness. The investigation wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But this time, Brianna Dorsey's story wouldn't fade into the background. This time, they would listen. And they would remember. Thank you for watching. Brianna Dorsey's case may have started in silence, but her story is far from over. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this one. And always remember, truth has a way of surfacing even in the darkest of times.